Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Or if it's your first time, welcome to my channel. My name is Marlene and I talk about eating disorder recovery and everything related to healing the relationship with your own body, with food and with movement. As you can see in the title, today we're going to talk about how to become a diet culture rebel. And let me explain to you why that is so important for me as an eating disorder recovery coach and as somebody who recovered from an eating disorder herself. So when I was in recovery, one of the hardest things for me was to be constantly surrounded by diet culture. Whether it was family members who constantly talked about diets, whether it was ads that I saw on TV or like outside, where they promoted certain weight loss foods, whether it was in the stores or whether it was on social media, diet culture is everywhere. And it can be super hard, if not impossible, to escape it. So instead of closing my eyes or pretending it wasn't there, I actually told myself, I'm not gonna do this anymore, but I also wanna become somebody who actually really shows that you can live a happier and healthier life if you don't let diets and diet culture have such a control over you. So when I was in recovery, it was super hard for me to set boundaries, especially around family members that made comments about my body or about their own bodies, because it was also triggering for me if somebody constantly talked about going on the next diet. It was extremely hard for me because I actively tried to distance myself from that kind of stuff, and to be surrounded by people who didn't really seem to care was extremely hurtful. But over time, I found my own way to cope with it. In the beginning, sometimes I was really unfriendly. I would leave the room, or I would be like, why did you say that? But I also had to understand that those people who make those comments are also part of diet culture, and they grew up in diet culture, and therefore they didn't know any better. They thought it's the only way to live. So the longer I've been doing my work, the more I understand what a big impact diet culture can have on everyone and how prevalent it is everywhere. So over time, I think for me, it was super important to really get firm in my own lifestyle. And what I mean by that is in recovery, you can still be very insecure. You tend to compare yourself to others. Am I eating too much? Is it really right to eat that way? Is it really okay to take a rest from working out? And that is normal. I was there too. But once I was really healing, and once I was allowing my body to go where it needed to go, and once I understood that what I was doing was 1,500 times healthier than to keep up with the eating disorder that took away so many years of my life already, then I understood that I really wanted to distance myself from diet culture. And so not only did I read a lot of studies about certain things, I really try to do a fact check on a lot of things that diet culture tells us, whether it is, cutting carbs is super healthy, whether it is not eating a certain amount of calories or not eating more than a certain amount of calories is the only way to go. I really fact checked, and I found out that this is certainly not true. A lot of those numbers are actually made up, and for a lot of people it's way healthier to listen to their bodies and to give their bodies enough energy than to be controlled by certain numbers like this. Another thing that I constantly did was to remind myself that diets and diet culture and following those rules never really brought me true happiness. In the beginning of my eating disorder, I thought if I could change my body a little bit, that would change my entire life. And it did, but not for the better. So reminding myself where it brought me and that it actually took away so much freedom from me was also something that I constantly had to do. And another thing is, nothing is unhealthier than to stress about food. No amount of food, no ingredient will be more harmful than to constantly stress around food. And if you really think about how much damage stress can do to your body and how much damage stress can be caused by under-eating, by over-exercising, then it should be reason enough. Once I started to set boundaries, I also understood that a lot of people actually have a very fragile mindset around diet culture. They might say certain things or they might follow certain rules because that's the only way that I know. But once they start to talk to somebody who has a little bit of a different viewpoint, they allow themselves to also open up and to be like, okay, maybe that isn't the only way to go. Because think about it like this. If somebody grew up in a family that only had diet culture rules, that never really practiced intuitive eating, and where they were only praised for a small body, of course that person is going to think that is reality. They never really grew up with somebody who modeled a healthy relationship with food or their body, and therefore they think it's normal to constantly fight their body. But once those people talk to somebody who embodies body neutrality or body positivity, whatever you want to call it, but I'm a big fan of body neutrality, it can be so helpful and it can be so eye-opening for a lot of people. So to me, it was not about attacking people, and of course it's always about the relationship you have to a certain person, but it was more about modeling something, just like living up to these new standards that I made for my own in order to model for other people, hey, this is possible. It is possible to listen to your body. It is possible to not go on another diet just because summer is closed. And oftentimes this is what those people need. And so, of course, you should always do it for yourself. And especially with a history of an eating disorder, you deserve it so much to finally detach from those rules, from those thoughts, and to allow yourself to like really eat intuitively and to listen to your body and to not go on the other diet. But I also found myself, finding community. And of course, as every community, there can be extremes to it. And I'm not a big fan of going to one extreme and like not listening to any other opinions. But once you start to build your own algorithm, you will see that there's a lot of people out there who actually promote anti-diet culture, who promote listening to their bodies. But I still want to call out, like, try not to attack people. Try to understand that a lot of people either grew up a certain way or just have other beliefs. You cannot change every single person, and that's okay. I accept that there's going to be a lot of people out there who will always diet, who will maybe also put content about that kind of stuff out there. And while sometimes I react to it, and sometimes if I think the stuff is very harmful, I might comment on it, sometimes I also just have to let it go and have to understand that not everyone has the same viewpoint, and that this is what these people really want to live like. It's okay. They might never see that there's another life out there for them, but it's not your responsibility to show them. It's your responsibility to live up to those standards for yourself. And then chances are that you're going to teach some other people just by living a certain way. The next thing that I really want you to think about is, who do you identify as? A lot of people with eating disorders actually start to identify as the sick person, or as the skinny person, as the super active person. And oftentimes there's like so many underlying beliefs and underlying issues that we actually have to, really take a look at to understand, like, why do you have the urge to identify as that person, as a person who's super skinny, as a person who's super quote-unquote disciplined. And at the same time, of course, identifying too much as a person who's like anti-diet culture or a diet culture rebel could also be a little bit extreme. But you can identify yourself as the person who like healed, who started to listen to their body, and therefore oftentimes becoming a diet culture rebel, is the logical step, but you don't have to make this your whole new identity. I'm just saying, once you start to live to those standards, once you start to heal your relationship and to also like actively detach, it can have such a big impact on your healing journey. And again, in recovery, it can be very, very common and very normal for that to not go super easy. You might find it very hard to distance yourself from certain content, which is why I always tell my clients, if you feel like you need a social media break, do so. Or on a lot of apps, you can actually just like change the settings into what you want to see and what kind of content you don't want to see on your For You page. That can be super helpful just for a while, to not constantly see a certain type of content, because as I said before, that kind of subconsciously creates your reality, even though it might not be the full reality, but it seems to you like reality. On the other hand, once your algorithm changes and you see a lot of people who promote body neutrality, you might think this is reality, and then you go out there and might be disappointed by so many people who still promote diets. And also, as I said before, you're not going to change everyone. It's okay for other people to live that lifestyle, but you have to become firm enough in your recovery and in your healing journey to understand that you don't have to be impacted by that. Just because your neighbor or your friend or whoever is doing a diet does not mean that this has to have an impact on you. And the further along you get in your recovery, the more you feel that way. And oftentimes in the end of recovery, and once you're fully recovered, you don't even have the urge. I sometimes even feel bad for people when I see that they're dieting or cutting out certain food groups, but that doesn't mean that I have to educate them constantly. It's just based on my own experience, and I'm very, very glad that I'm not doing that anymore. But again, it doesn't mean that everyone has to agree with me. So I hope this short video helped you to kind of change your perspective on that a little bit, and to understand that you create your own life and your own reality. And if you don't want to live up to diet culture standards anymore, it's your decision and you can live up to it. And there's a lot of us out there who support that and who you can connect with. And just understand that this is your life and you only have one life, so decide wisely how you want to spend it at. Let me know in the comments how you feel about the topic. If you have any other questions, and as always, I will see you in the next one.